Jen, welcome to the Last Date podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. And I was actually really happy to have this opportunity to kind of reflect on the dating experience in kind of a neutral way. I think sometimes I can kind of do this pendulum swing of hyperfixating on any little mistakes I've made in dating, or kind of on the other end of the spectrum, I don't want to think about that ever again kind of feeling. So it was nice to really think about this experience in a more thoughtful way. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited about the conversation. And I think you have a really unique perspective about dating because you're dating with kids. And I wanted to ask first, what was the timeline? So you got married and had kids at a pretty young age, right?
Yeah, pretty young. I got married at 20 and I had my kids at 24 and 27. So to me, that's pretty young in my mind. I started dating again, kind of early 30s. So that's kind of my timeline.
What was that experience like dating for the first time now with kids?
Yeah, I think it was really new for me. I really hadn't dated much before. I was so young when I got married. And so I didn't have this experience to compare it to. I wasn't trying to remember how to date or kind of remember what that was like. It was kind of all brand new. And definitely, dating apps didn't exist or anything like that. So I was pretty naive, pretty green coming into this experience. I didn't have a lot of single friends or anything either. So yeah, I remember actually going into Bumble and looking at these matches and thinking well, I guess I just get to choose which one is going to be my boyfriend. So, obviously it doesn't work like that. And so I was pretty naive. It was it was exciting, but pretty overwhelming. And you feel a little bit like a teenager, and I think, all these people have this dating experience that I don't have. I kind of missed out on all that. So I'm kind of starting from the very beginning.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was it like dating with kids particularly? And how old were they at the time?
I probably started putting myself out there when they were maybe around age 5 and 8 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually think I learned a lot about dating and who I want to be in a dating relationship because of parenting and kind of what I've learned from that. So I think showing up in a dating experience with kids, I actually felt a lot more confident and a lot more just sure of my identity. I think even just the process of having kids makes you a lot more confident. Really, I grew up in a very patriarchal kind of system, and I felt like, I just have to outsource my identity to someone else. And it's no one's fault or anything. It's just sort of a system that you play a role in. And I think the motherhood journey really showed me a lot of who I am, what my identity is. And so I think I feel grateful for that to show up in dating now, being a more confident person, feeling like I have my voice, that kind of thing. So I feel much more empowered. I think I probably would have dated from a very different place without kids. So that's a big part of my motherhood dating journey. I would say also with kids, I'm really not in any hurry to get started with someone or to look for some end goal. I think I'm not going into a dating relationship hoping to find is this the one? Am I going to get married? Are we going to have kids? Because those things don't feel that important to me. I think because I feel pretty secure in my own family. So yeah, I'm definitely not in a big rush to get into a relationship with anyone. And I think that helps me kind of enjoy the process a little bit more and try to just be more present with how things are going. How does this feel for me? So I feel like that's a positive for me. It seems hard to be in that situation, to feel like, oh, I really want to get with someone. I really want to start a family. I really want to build something. And to be on a timeline in that way. So I feel grateful to not really be in that position. Also, I think when you have kids, you get really good at repair. And with kids, you have really met a part of yourself that maybe you don't like that much, that maybe is, frustrated, exhausted. You really have to be good at apologizing about kind of co-regulating with your kids. And I think some of those skills can spill over into dating. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from dating with kids.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There was a guest that I had on last week. He was the first male guest, and he said that when he's dated women who have had children, he's noticed that they're more grounded, more self-aware, more emotionally intelligent. And I think what you're describing with the repair and having to recognize, I mean, I imagine kids hold up a mirror sometimes, and there's a lot of maybe forced inner work that that happens as a result.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think with kids, you're so highly motivated to do that work. I think for me, in a relationship, maybe there would have been less motivation. It's easier to just be like, well, that's not going to work out. But with your kids, you are going to make this work. Like, you have to work on yourself if you want to really enrich that relationship with them. So yeah, I think I feel way more motivated to kind of flex those muscles of repair and regulation with them. And so it does make it a little easier in relationship too. So yeah, that's interesting.
Can you tell me more about the confidence that you gained by having kids? So you were saying having kids and the relationship you have with your kids gave you even more identity and gave you confidence in yourself. Can you explain what about that experience gave you that confidence?
Yeah, totally. I think even like I was saying, the actual act of having kids is a big deal. And I had a really great midwife who really was empowering for me. I think that was the first time in my life when I wasn't looking to someone else to give me an answer, or, someone else to be in charge. This was the first time where she was like, we're looking to you, like, we're following your lead here. And so that was really empowering, and feeling like, okay, I am the mom here. I am the one who kind of gets to lead this process. And so that was really the first time I've ever felt like that. And so I think that was really powerful. And the role that you take on in your family with young kids, it's a lot, and it is empowering to feel like, okay, we can do this. And so I think that's where a lot of the confidence comes from. And, your kids are looking to you to be kind of that safe place for them. They're looking to you to take care of them. And so I think you kind of get a lot of confidence from that too.
So you mentioned that you're not dating a ton because there's maybe a little bit less of a motivation because your life is so great. Like, you have this nice little family and you really love your life. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, totally. And I think I don't feel this urgency to meet someone or feel like, oh, I really want to, fill this hole in my life or something. Because I think I have a lot of peace in my life. And I think that's a pretty common thing with single moms. Usually have worked really hard to make their life feel peaceful and feel a little bit more fulfilled on their own, and feel more like I feel more like my wholehearted self. I feel great in my life, and I have a lot of my needs kind of met with my own little family. And so I don't feel the same kind of urgency to meet someone. Sometimes I know I'll talk with someone who's like, oh, I really just need someone to give me a hug. And I'm like, wow, that sounds tough. That I would be in a bad place if I felt like no one has hugged me or something like that. So I don't feel this huge motivation to go date someone. I think if someone is going to add to the peace in my life, then I'm all for it. But I feel pretty good on my, just in my own little family.
Yeah. It sounds like you're getting a lot of your needs met from your kids.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel like I have a solid identity in my role in my family. I feel like we really work as a unit well together. So I'm almost hesitant to date someone because I don't want to disrupt that. I feel like we've got our little family unit going for us already.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It would have to be a real ad.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to change the energy of my family. And also, even if this person never meets my kids, I don't want someone affecting my energy in a negative way where sometimes if you have a hard time with a date or a boyfriend or something, sometimes you want to like lay in bed and kind of cry. And I'm not going to do that. I don't really have the space to do that in my life. I've got to show up for my kids. So if someone's energy is going to be involved with me and my family, then it has to be, it has to add to the piece, not take away from it.
Is there a difference dating now with kids who are a little bit older? Your kids are teens?
My son is 13 and my daughter's 10. So teenage, tween kind of age.
So is there a difference between dating when your kids are a little bit older versus younger?
Definitely. I think maybe the biggest lesson that I've learned in parenting, this goes for dating, it goes for everything in life, is that, everything is changing. The good seasons, the hard seasons, everything is always changing. It's all impermanent. And so, when they're young, you think like it's going to be like this forever. And, one of my kids had a really hard time sleeping at night. And, that makes you a little crazy. And you think like, it's always going to be like this. Like I'm never going to get a full night of sleep ever again. But of course, like it changes. And so when your kids are young, definitely their needs are more physical. There's a lot of, you're carrying them, you're pushing them in the stroller, you're loading up the bikes, you're pushing them on the swing, you're making all the food. It's a lot of, you're really tired. And your kids are on you all the time. They're crawling on you. They want to jump on you. They want to cuddle you. And all of that is great. But it's a lot different when they're older. Sometimes when they're young, you're just so physically exhausted. And now that they're older, they still need you. They still need their mom, but it's in a much different way. I hear about this term. It's called houseplant energy. And when your kids are teenagers, they want to have a mom who's like a houseplant, who's there and is present and can be available, but it's not in this big, loud, physical way. So I'm kind of trying to embody a little bit more of that. It's definitely less physically exhausting, but definitely more of emotional needs. And, logistically, it's a lot of driving them around to their sports and everything like that. So it's a lot different. When they're little, your time is so limited outside of your role as being their mom. And now, that they're tween age, it's definitely a lot easier to kind of step out for an hour or to, they're okay. They can make their own breakfast in the morning. They have their own skills that they're developing. It's important for me to give them more independence. And so I get more independence as a part of that. So it definitely changes.
So tell me more about that. What did it look like in terms of the amount of time that you had in your schedule to date when your kids were younger versus now?
Well, definitely when they're young, very limited. I would say maybe I could do, I would have to plan really in advance. and I could maybe go out for a couple hours. And of course, everyone's situation is different, but that was kind of where I was. And also, I started dating more like during the pandemic, so it's a challenge for everyone at that time.
Yeah.
But it definitely didn't have much time or availability. Now it's much more flexible. Even just having your kids in school all the time, or, they have to go to practice and then I have 2 hours free in the evening when they're at practice. So it's definitely much more flexible now.
Are they aware when you're going out on dates?
Well, I will say, I'm not a huge dater, so there's not that much to be aware of. But I would say the main thing that they notice is who is texting me. They are, they're kind of paying attention to what comes up on my phone. They're not on there, but they see whose name pops up on there. And so I would say that's kind of the main thing that they're curious about. But they don't ever really know that much about my, what I'm doing good when they're not around. So I try to protect them in that way. They don't need to know all the details of that, but it's interesting as they get older how in tune they are with you. And, they say like, oh, and we always know, ask mom to do something fun when X is texting her because she's in a good mood. So, they're aware about the dynamic of things. But they don't know the details. Yeah.
Have they expressed that they want you to have a partner or a boyfriend?
Yes. I would say my daughter is more interested in that and curious what that would be like. But when I ask them, be like, well, would you want someone to be around? Like, do you want someone to come over here and have dinner with us, or, go do XYZ with us? Then they're much more hesitant. Then they're like, not really. Like, maybe he can come over for an hour once a week. So I think in reality, they like our little bubble and they don't want to change that too much. And I'm fine with that. So I think that also plays a role in why I don't date a ton, just because I like our little protected bubble.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I brought them once to go dancing, like a daytime dance session, whatever you
At
call it.
Joe's, or was this?
I brought
cool.
them to Joe's, and I brought them to ABGB, and I think that was the first time they really ever saw me do any kind of partner dance, and they did not like that.
Interesting.
I think they've never seen me do anything like that, or I think my son was like, I don't like those people touching you, or how they're looking at you. And so I think that was the first time that they really saw, oh, I am actually still like a woman doing things out in the world. And so I think since then I haven't really exposed them to much of that. So
yeah. That's interesting. Have you ever introduced your kids to a guy that you were dating?
I have not. Maybe we've run into each other out around town. Austin is so small, you run into everyone, but not in any context of, oh, this is my boyfriend or this is who I'm dating. Usually they'll run into someone, or they'll hang out with a man who is a friend, and maybe we had dated previously. And so it's more in that kind of casual context. Seems like a big deal to introduce someone as like, this is who I'm dating. We're going to have this formal meetup. That is important if that's the circumstance that you're in, but I haven't been in that scenario before.
What would it take for you to introduce someone to your kids? Is it time? Is it the where you are in the relationship?
Yeah, I would say there's not a specific time. I think it would just have to be the right person, the right context. I think where they're older, there's less need for this like formal kind of meetup. I think if I were dating the right person and felt like, oh, I want to integrate them a little bit more in my life, we could have a casual integration of my kids with them. But, yeah, it hasn't happened yet.
What would that potentially look like? Would it be in your home? Would it be, we're going to go out and get ice cream and this guy is going to be there? Like, would you tell them in advance? Would you just let it, like, what, have you thought about what that scenario might look like?
Yeah, I would say it would have to be pretty like neutral space. I don't think I would have anyone come meet us at our house. I think it would probably be like, oh, we're out of the park and they are showing up here for a little bit. And yeah, I would definitely give them a warning if something was happening. So I would try to make it pretty casual and pretty short. I think that's important too. You don't want to sign up to do a big excursion with someone and it not go well. So that would be probably how I would plan it.
How would you want a guy to show up for you in a relationship?
Okay. I think there are a few things that are really important to me. And of course, there are the parts that are important for anyone. You want someone who has integrity, who is honest, who has, a character that you admire. And so I think those are important. I think in the context of dating someone with kids, there are other parts that play a role too. I think some characteristics that are important, like curiosity about that part of your life. I think that's a big part, being patient and having really the capacity to show up for someone with kids. Those are really important. I think as far as curiosity goes, not coming on too strong is important, not being like, what's up with your kids? What are they doing? All that. But witnessing someone being a mom is really important. And I think that's a really big grief in single parenting, is that there's not someone there to witness you in this role of being a mom. And, not someone there to share these memories with you and of your kids growing up. And so someone who's really curious and welcoming of like, oh, I love hearing about what you and your kids did today, or feeling like it's an honor for them to get pictures of my kids or know kind of what we're doing. And I think that's really important. I think really, partnership is about witnessing each other, seeing someone. And so for someone to come into my world and be curious about that part of my life is really amazing. I really love that. So that's important. Just being patient with the pacing of things, kind of letting go of other expectations of how fast things are going to go. I think that's important. Because every person, every family, their timeline is going to be different. And just capacity, I think is huge. That is, and it's not just, are they able to show up here? Are they able to be with our family? It's kind of about how do they see themselves in the world? Like, do they have capacity to show up for their friends when they're moving, or, do they show up that way at work, or do they help their family? And it's just kind of a way of being in the world where you have capacity to add value. And so I think that's really important. And I think I've had some good examples of that in my dating experience. And so I think that's really meaningful. And of course, I'm asking that of someone. I want to be a partner who has capacity for them and their needs too. So I think those are important.
What were some of those examples of men who have done it well?
Okay, I will say a man that I dated pretty early on who kind of set the bar high. He was great with this. And I would say once the kids and I were moving to a new house, and the kids wanted to be involved in the moving process. They wanted to be there. Our friends were coming with the trailer. So it wasn't something that he was going to be there for, because it was more like me and the kids. But he saw okay, you guys have it handled, but there's this one piece. This is kind of like, you really need a professional to do this part. What are you going to do for that? And it wasn't something I was asking for or hinting at, but he was like, why don't you just pick a time, you and the kids go get ice cream, and I'm going to come over and I'll get some movers. We're going to handle this. And so just don't even think about it again. And so, that's really generous and just, he could see a need and how he could add value, how he could help me in the situation. So, that was very generous. Another example with this man, it was my first Christmas to not be with my kids for the full day. I spent the morning with them, and then they were going with their dad and grandparents. And I really was anxious about it. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel, what I was going to want to do. And he originally was planning to go home for the holidays, but he said, like, I want to be here in case you want to hang out. Like, if you don't want to hang out, if you want to be alone, then you can do that. But if you want to come over, I'm going to have all this good food. We can go on a walk. You can just watch a movie alone if you want, or I can be there. And so I think he could anticipate what some of my needs would be and just made himself available for that. So
that sounds like the perfect response or the perfect way to be there.
Yeah. So I think that kind of capacity, and, he was like that with everything. He was like that with how he treated his family and how he was at his job. And so I think that kind of capacity to really add value to your world is important. It's really attractive.
Yeah. Is there any feeling that you would want a guy to co-parent with you at some point?
I mean, that's a good question. I would say where my kids are a little older, that role is really different. I would say if someone were coming into my world when my kids are, 4 years old, yes, it would look a lot different then. But my kids have been parented, and my role, even as their parent, is changing. So
you're the houseplant.
Yeah, I'm the houseplant. So I wouldn't necessarily want someone to come in and kind of totally change the energy or feel like they have to fill this role of being a step parent. I think really what I would be looking for is someone who wants to see me, wants to be with me. And the kids are kind of like a added bonus because they're great. They're not, they don't need to have someone start the bath for them. They don't need very much anymore in that way. So I think getting to witness these kids grow up and like their energy, I think is really a bonus. I wouldn't say I'm looking for someone to come be their my co-parent or have so much of a traditional parenting role. Maybe I would have felt differently about that at an earlier stage, but not so much right now.
Sure. I think that's one of the assumptions some men make about dating a single mom is that the expectation is going to be that they step into a parent role. And I think a lot of times that's not the case. Are there any other assumptions that you think men make about dating a single mom?
Yeah, I think that's a big one, that they're like, I don't want to be a stepdad kind of thing. And that's valid. And so I think also there's an assumption that it's going to be really challenging, that it's going to be hard to schedule. It's going to be hard to integrate into someone's life. And, depending on the stage that you're in with your family, it can be a challenge. But I think as things change, it really gets a lot easier. So I think feeling like, it's going to be impossible to really get involved with this person, I won't be able to be in her life in the way I want to be, is kind of wrong. And I think also men feel like they're always going to be in second place to their the kids. And in a way, I think that's true. I think a mom is always going to prioritize her kids. But like I was saying, as things change, my role with my kids really changes too. And they don't need me in the same way that they used to. And so even though I am always going to prioritize my kids, it doesn't mean I can't also prioritize a partner. So,
yeah. When I was in my late 30s, I dated a woman who was a single mom, and she had a 13 or 14. And the only reason why we dated in the first place was because she was the sister of a good friend of mine. And we all went on a group trip together, and there was chemistry. And so we started dating after that. And I was nervous about the concept of dating someone who had a kid. And I didn't want kids of my own, which was one thing. And I also made a lot of assumptions about, okay, she's not going to have a lot of time, and I don't know, like, how often is her kid going to be around, and what does she expect my role to be, especially in these early stages. And while I was on the apps, I remember swiping left on women who had kids. It was just an automatic no. But what I learned from that experience was, okay, I made a lot of wrong assumptions. We had plenty of time to hang out. Her kid was super cool, like to the extent that Caroline was even around, because she was always with like a friend or something. And it was like summertime. And so she was always just kind of out and about doing her thing. And so we had plenty of time to spend together. And again, yeah, when Caroline was around, like she was super cool. And I think, the other thing was there was zero expectation that I play any sort of role in parenting or get involved from that perspective. So yeah, it was actually a really cool experience to have that I would not have had if I had been in control of deciding, am I going to meet a person who is a single mom?
Totally. Yeah, I think a lot of people have the automatic, like, oh, I'm not going to date someone with kids. And yeah, there's sometimes not a huge understanding of what actually is the situation. Like, what is it going to look like? So I think it's good. I think actually I date more people that I just meet or I know through someone, unless, I don't do any dating apps now, but I think it's much easier for me to date someone when they already know kind of my family situation, or we've had experience with each other in a different context. So
yeah. One other assumption I think people make is that there's going to be some family drama or drama with the ex and that sort of thing. So what I have heard from a lot of single moms is that there is no family drama. I mean, most of the time it's amicable, especially if there's been time and distance from the breakup. And so it ends up just being a logistical handing kids off or negotiating times. I think a lot of men have an assumption that they're going to step into this like very volatile family situation. It's like, no, that's usually not the case.
Totally. Yeah. And I think most parents do the best that they absolutely can to make their home life and environment very peaceful. So I would say even if there is some kind of, lingering feelings or conflict, I would say that probably never really surfaces, because a mom usually does everything she can to make things more peaceful. So yeah. There is that assumption that it's going to be chaos, and it's usually not the case. Yeah.
What have you learned about dating and relationships that you wish you had known from the very beginning?
I think I have learned to just slow down with my own neurotic tendencies. I think I want to look at myself with compassion when I'm kind of spiraling, and just slow down. And I actually use my parenting voice with myself a lot, of just like, oh, you were disappointed with that, or like, of course that hurt, and it didn't go the way you thought it was going to go, and it makes sense that you're upset. And so I try to talk to my own self with more gentleness and less like, you messed that up, or I can't believe you said that, So I try to be a little nicer to myself, the way I would talk to my own kids. I try to talk to myself that way.
That's super healthy.
I mean, it's helpful when you're actually doing that a lot, every day. You're talking to your kids with that gentleness. It's easier to kind of put that on yourself. But that's like a lifelong process that I've been working on.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us have a pretty negative voice. It's pretty harsh. So I think that's something that we could all get better at. And I think it also affects our romantic relationships, because if our pattern is talking negatively to ourselves and being harsh with ourselves, the second our partner messes up, that's the voice that clicks in.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think like the self-compassion part is something I've really tried to learn a lot of and tried to implement a lot in my life. And so, I try to be a little slower to react, just kind of be more calm, be a little bit more relaxed. And, for example, I can think of maybe I'm seeing someone and this is real. This really happened. I'm dating someone and they're sharing with me this conflict that they're having with their mom. And, the date is over, we are done talking, and then I go to my house and I spiral about it for 3 days thinking, well, he's probably not being very kind to his mom. He's probably talking to her in this negative way. He's probably going to talk to me that way. One day he's probably going to talk to my kids that way. And so, I can be a little neurotic. And so, we meet up again and I think, well, I'm ready to end it because of this, conflict that he's having with his mom. And then, he shares more about it. He shares how he apologized, how he worked to repair it. And so I'm kind of like, whoops, well, never mind. And
glad I didn't jump the gun on that one.
Yeah. But I did spend 3 days being completely neurotic about it. And so trying not to do that so much, trying to, of course, like you need to take action sometimes and have conversations that are difficult and make decisions, but doing that less out of a place of anxiety and like this future spiraling, and more out of like, how do I feel in this present moment? Like, how is this actually affecting my life right now? And so I'm learning to be a little slower to react.
That's a really good one. So you mentioned that you're meeting men more in real life than on the apps. So at what point do you disclose to these men that are interested in you that you have kids?
I mean, I would say pretty much right away. I mean, maybe it's not the first thing out of my mouth, but I would never go on a full date with someone without saying that I have kids. So pretty much right away. And also, my kids, they kind of bleed into every aspect of my life. So I feel like it would be so hard and unnatural for me to have a conversation with someone without that coming up in some way. So pretty much immediately.
So it sounds like organically it comes up. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I definitely have been approached by people and, I'll give them my number and then they see on my phone, oh, you're like, my lock screen is a picture of me with kids. And so you kind of get their reaction immediately, what they think about that. So
what have been the reactions?
I mean, it varies, and it's a good indication to me if we're compatible or not. If someone kind of, you see sort of the wide eyes, they kind of freak out a little bit.
They go white as a sheet.
Yeah. I think it's probably not going to be a match. But if someone is like, oh, wow, like what a beautiful family or something, then to me, that sort of opens the door to be like, well, okay, maybe we might hit it off. So yeah, I would say people have different reactions. And I would say sometimes people really value being able to be like spontaneous and travel a lot. And if that's the case, if that kind of comes up and they're sort of like, I don't know if it's going to work out because you have kids, then to me, I'm like, well, I don't think we're compatible. So it's a good gauge of if we're a fit or not, if we have similar values.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So theoretically, if you wanted to take a somewhat spontaneous trip, could you do that?
I think it would depend on what spontaneous is. I mean, I certainly have traveled with men before, but I wouldn't say it was like, oh, let's do this today. It's
sure.
Like, okay, what weekend are you free? And so, there's some amount of planning. So maybe not spontaneous, but definitely you can still travel and have adventures. But
give me an example of a timeline. So let's say a guy said, "Hey, I want to take a trip as soon as possible." When is when are you first available? Are we talking a week? Are we talking a month? Are we talking 6 months?
I would say, okay, I've got every other weekend. So, we could plan something for 2 weeks from now. Definitely summer is easier. But I've definitely taken a weekend trip with someone and, we plan it a week in advance and, we know what the timeline is.
I would call that pretty spontaneous, planning planning a vacation a couple of weeks in advance.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So I can be spontaneous. Yeah.
Tell me about a good date that you've been on recently, and then tell me about a bad date that you've been on recently.
I would say maybe one of the best dates I've been on. This guy, he picked me up at my house on his bike, and we went on this nice long bike ride, and we had a picnic at the park, and it was great. I mean, maybe that sounds simple, but I think I felt really understood with that because I like to be active. I like to connect with someone outside in nature, and so it was perfect. So I think it's simple, but it was so nice. So I think that's maybe one of the best dates I've been on. And I really had a hard time thinking about a bad date.
That's a good thing.
I don't think I have any crazy stories of a bad date. I think because usually a first date, I keep it pretty low key. I like to go for a walk. That's almost always a first date is going on a walk on the trail. And so, I've had plenty of dates where there's not a connection, and that's fine. But if you're on a walk, you can kind of decide how long or how short you want this date to be. You don't even have to really look at this person if you don't want to. You're kind of side by side. And so I haven't had any crazy bad dates, but I will say I was probably someone's worst date. We were on a walk, like I like to do, go on a walk. And this was a few years ago. This was back in 2021 when the Austin real estate market was so crazy. And, it's definitely different now, but I had put in so many offers on houses and nothing. And then earlier that day, before this first date, I had put an offer on a house. And, I go on the date. It's Friday night, 8:30. And so my realtor is texting me. And I'm like, okay, I need to look at this. And so, I end up getting on speakerphone with this guy here on the trail, and he's walking me through. I have to do all this DocuSign. It ends up taking forever to put in this offer, kind of change this offer on this house. And so I'm feeling so bad. And in hindsight, I should have said, can we reschedule this? Can we meet up another time? I need to take care of this. But the urgency of the real estate market at that time, you just feel like I have to do this. And so, I ended up getting this house. That's where I live. So cool. It worked out. But I, just dragged this guy on this DocuSign journey with me. So that was probably his worst date that he's been on. But yeah, I feel fortunate I haven't had a lot of bad dates. Only have just been that guy's bad date.
That is really funny. All right. So I had a thought that I have a theory why you haven't had bad dates. And it sounds like you're meeting a lot of people in real life, doing your normal social things.
Right.
And you have an opportunity to vet people before going out, agreeing to go out on a first date with them in a romantic context. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe we've had some interaction already, so I can kind of tell if there's, potential for chemistry. We kind of have a feel for each other's lives. So I think that's much easier than just, agreeing to meet up with a total stranger and thinking is there going to be anything here or not? Or is it going to be horrible or not? So yeah, I think it's a lot easier to just meet people in real life. And I don't keep up with what's happening in dating culture really, but it seems like more people are not using dating apps. More people are meeting people just in the world. So it seems to make more sense.
It's a good thing. It's a good shift that we're starting to make.
Yeah.
All right. So I like to end the podcast by asking, what is something that people don't generally learn about you until they really get to know you?
Okay. I would say it takes a lot for me to be my kind of comfortable, like goofy self. I would say I come across a little bit more serious, maybe, which I don't know if I like that, but I would say I'm pretty goofy inside. I've got a lot of inner, my family calls it like inner Kramer energy, and maybe that ages me there, but I can be pretty goofy. But most people, it takes a while for me to get there. And I think when someone sees me around my kids, they see that more because that's my most like playful self. So yeah, that's kind of, if you ever get to that stage in dating me where you're around my kids and me, then maybe you see more of the goofy side.
You know you've made it when
Yeah.
you see the inner Kramer come out. What does that look like? What is the inner Kramer?
I don't know, just so silly. And
You walking through doors and like freaking out?
yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I can be a little neurotic. And so I think I usually try to hide that part of myself. And so when I feel like, oh, I can really show up as myself, then that side really comes out. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Jen.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.